The scream tore through the moonlit forest like a blade through silk, and Vladimir, king of the northern coven, felt every muscle in his ancient body lock into place as the words reached his ears. "Kill me instead!" He stood frozen, his obsidian blade suspended mid-strike above the trembling form of a young vampire hunter he'd cornered against an oak tree. The hunter's eyes were wide with terror, blood trickling from a gash on his temple. But Vladimir's attention had shifted entirely to the girl who'd just burst through the underbrush, her chest heaving, her dark hair wild with leaves and twigs. She was human. Utterly, completely, devastatingly human. He could hear her rabbit-fast heartbeat from 20 paces away, could smell the sweet warmth of her blood beneath fear-slicked skin. And she was offering herself to him. The blade slipped from his fingers, hitting the forest floor with a muted thud. "Nora, no!" The hunter gasped, trying to push himself upright. "Run!" But the girl Nora didn't run. She stepped closer instead, placing herself between Vladimir and the hunter with trembling hands raised as if she could somehow shield the boy with her bare palms. Her brown eyes were bright with unshed tears, but there was steel beneath the fear. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He's just a kid. He didn't know what he was doing. I'll do whatever you want. Just let him go." Vladimir stared at her, genuinely speechless for the first time in 3 centuries. The wind shifted, carrying her scent more fully to him, jasmine and rain and something uniquely her, and he felt an unfamiliar sensation twist in his chest. The boy behind her couldn't have been more than 19, fumbling and reckless with his wooden stakes and silver-tipped arrows. He'd managed to kill 2 of Vladimir's youngest vampires before the king himself had tracked him down. Justice demanded blood, ancient law demanded it. And yet this girl stood before him, offering her life for a hunter who'd murdered his kind. "Do you understand what you're asking?" Vladimir's voice came out rougher than he intended, his accent thick with old-world inflection. He was tall, imposing in his black coat, his white hair falling past his shoulders like a river of moonlight. His pale skin seemed to glow in the darkness, and his crimson eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made most humans collapse in terror. She didn't collapse. She lifted her chin higher. "I understand perfectly," Nora said, though her voice shook. "My brother made a terrible mistake. He thought he believed the stories about vampires being monsters. But if you kill him, you'll prove him right. So take me. I'm offering freely. That has to count for something in your world, doesn't it? A willing exchange?" Vladimir's jaw tightened. She knew enough about vampire law to be dangerous. A life freely given held power, old magic that even he couldn't dismiss lightly. Behind her, the boy, her brother, was making wounded sounds of protest, but Vladimir barely heard him anymore. "You would die for him?" he asked quietly, taking a step closer. "You would let me drain every drop of blood from your veins for this fool who thought he could hunt creatures that have walked this earth for millennia?" "Yes." No hesitation. Her eyes met his without flinching, even as tears finally spilled down her cheeks. "He's all I have left. Our parents died 2 years ago, and he's been lost ever since. This vampire hunting obsession, it's not him. He's grieving and angry, and someone filled his head with lies. Please, I'm begging you." The wind carried the salt of her tears to him, and Vladimir felt something he hadn't experienced in longer than he could remember. Uncertainty. She was brave and foolish and utterly sincere. Her love for her brother radiated from her like heat from a flame. And the ancient laws that governed his kind were clear. A life freely given in exchange for a life owed could not be refused, but neither could he simply let the hunter go unpunished. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Nora Dalton." "And your brother?" "Felix Dalton," she whispered. "Please." Vladimir studied her for a long moment, his mind working through possibilities, consequences, the political ramifications of this decision. His council would be furious if he showed mercy. The other covens would see it as weakness. And yet, he moved with supernatural speed, and suddenly he was beside Felix, hauling the injured hunter to his feet with one hand. Nora gasped and stumbled back, but Vladimir held up his other hand in a staying gesture. "I accept your offer, Nora Dalton," he said formally. "Your life in exchange for his, but I will not kill you." Hope flared in her eyes, quickly followed by confusion. "You will come with me," Vladimir continued, his grip iron firm on Felix's collar. "To my court. You will serve in my household for 1 year, 365 days. You will be under my protection, bound by ancient law as my guest. During that time, your brother will live freely, but if he ever again raises a hand against my kind, the deal is void and both your lives are forfeit. Do you accept these terms?" "Don't do it, Nora," Felix groaned, blood staining his shirt. "Don't trust him." But Nora was already nodding, relief and terror warring on her face. "I accept. Just don't hurt him anymore, please." Vladimir released Felix with enough force to send him stumbling toward his sister. "Go," he commanded the young hunter, "and pray to whatever gods you believe in that you never cross my path again. Your sister's courage has bought your life, boy. Don't waste it." Felix looked between them, anguish written across his young face. "Nora, I can't let you go, Felix." Nora's voice was firm despite her tears. Please live for me. I'll find a way to get you back, Felix promised, backing away slowly. I swear it, if you try, she dies. Vladimir's words were flat, absolute. Accept this gift she's given you and use it wisely. Now leave before I change my mind. Felix hesitated one more agonizing moment before turning and running, disappearing into the dark forest. Nora watched him go, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, and Vladimir stood beside her in the moonlight, feeling the weight of what he'd just done settling over him like a cloak. When the sound of Felix's footsteps had faded completely, Nora turned to face him. Her tear-stained face was pale but composed. What happens now? Now you come with me. Vladimir retrieved his fallen blade, sheathing it at his side. The night grows late and my court will be waiting. Will you hurt me? She asked quietly. He looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the set of her shoulders, the way she held herself despite her fear, the fierce protectiveness that had driven her to sacrifice everything for her brother. Beautiful in a wild, unkempt way. Brave beyond reason. Human and fragile and entirely too precious. No, he said finally. You have my word, Nora Dalton. As king of the Northern Coven, I vow that no harm will come to you while you remain under my protection. Why? The question burst from her. Why would you agree to this? I'm nobody. Just some random girl. You could have killed us both. Vladimir was silent for a moment, considering his answer. Why had he agreed? Political strategy, he told himself. A human in his court bound by ancient law could be useful. A demonstration of mercy might strengthen his position with the more moderate vampire factions. But there was something else, too, something about the way she'd thrown herself between him and death without hesitation, the way her love for her brother had outweighed her survival instinct. Because, he said slowly, you reminded me that honor still exists in this world, and perhaps because I'm curious to know what kind of woman runs toward a vampire king instead of away. He held out his hand to her, pale and elegant in the moonlight. Come. I promise the journey will be swift. Nora stared at his outstretched hand, then took a shuddering breath and placed her smaller hand in his. His skin was cool to the touch, and the moment their palms connected, Vladimir felt that strange twist in his chest, again sharper this time, almost painful. Without warning, he swept her up into his arms, eliciting a startled yelp from her. Hold on, he murmured, and then he was moving, faster than human eyes could track, carrying her through the forest with supernatural grace. She buried her face against his chest, her fingers clutching at his coat, and he was acutely aware of every place their bodies touched, the warmth of her seeping through the fabric between them. The forest blurred around them as he ran, and within minutes they'd covered miles that would have taken a human hours to walk. Finally, they emerged from the tree line onto a cliff overlooking the city. Below, lights twinkled like fallen stars, but Vladimir moved toward what appeared to be a solid rock face. He set Nora down gently, steadying her when she swayed. Watch, he said softly. He pressed his palm against the stone, and ancient magic responded to his touch. The rock face shimmered and then split apart, revealing a tunnel that descended into darkness lit by ethereal blue flames that burned without heat. This is one of the entrances to the Undercity, Vladimir explained, noting her wide-eyed expression. Where my court resides, stay close to me. They descended together, Vladimir matching his pace to her slower human steps. The tunnel walls were carved with intricate patterns, runes, and symbols from a dozen dead languages. Nora ran her fingers along them wonderingly. How old are you? She asked suddenly. 347 years, he answered. I was turned during a war you've never heard of, in a country that no longer exists. And you're a king? Of the Northern Coven, yes. We are one of 7 major vampire courts in this part of the world. Each has its own territory, its own laws, its own politics. He glanced at her. You're taking this remarkably well. Nora laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to the sound. I'm not sure I have a choice, besides. I've known vampires were real for about 6 months, ever since Felix got obsessed with hunting them. I just never thought I'd actually meet one, let alone become one's. What am I, exactly, a prisoner? Your servant. My ward, Vladimir said firmly. The distinction matters in vampire society. You are under my direct protection, which means no one can harm you without answering to me. You'll have your own chambers, freedom to move about the court within reason, and I'll expect you to attend me when I require it. Attend you how? There was wariness in her voice now. He stopped walking and turned to face her, his crimson eyes serious. I will never force myself upon you, Nora. The thought disgusts me. When I say attend, I mean accompany me to functions. Perhaps assist with correspondence or other tasks. Nothing more, you have my word. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. Okay, thank you. They continued downward, and gradually Nora became aware of sounds echoing up from below, voices, music, the gentle splash of water. The tunnel opened into an enormous cavern that made her gasp. It was a city, a literal city beneath the earth, carved from living rock and lit by thousands of those strange blue flames. Buildings rose in elegant spires connected by graceful bridges that arched over an underground river. Gardens grew in impossible profusion, fed by some source of light Nora couldn't identify, and everywhere, beautiful and terrible in equal measure, were vampires. They moved through the streets with inhuman grace, all of them bearing the same pale skin and elegant features, though their hair ranged from white to silver to the palest blonde. They wore modern clothing mixed with older styles, leather jackets over Victorian waistcoats, jeans paired with silk cravats. All of them stopped and stared as Vladimir passed with a human girl at his side. "Ignore them," Vladimir murmured, placing a possessive hand at the small of her back. "They're merely curious." Curious was putting it mildly. Nora could feel dozens of crimson eyes tracking their progress, as Vladimir guided her through winding streets toward the largest structure in the cavern, a palace carved from black stone that seemed to drink in the light around it. Guards flanked the entrance, both male vampires with hard eyes and harder expressions. They bowed as Vladimir approached. "My lord," one said, his gaze flicking to Nora with barely concealed disdain. "The council has been awaiting your return." "They can wait longer," Vladimir said curtly. "First, I'll see my guests settled." He led Nora through corridors of polished stone, past tapestries that looked centuries old and artwork that would have made museums weep. Finally, they reached a set of ornate double doors which he pushed open to reveal a bedroom that was larger than the entire apartment Nora had shared with Felix. The bed was massive, draped in dark silk. A fireplace dominated one wall, already lit with those strange blue flames. Tall windows looked out over the underground city, and a door stood ajar, revealing what appeared to be a bathroom beyond. "These are your chambers," Vladimir said. "You'll find clothing in the wardrobe that should fit you, and anything else you need, you have only to ask. There's a bell pull by the bed, ring it, and a servant will come." Nora turned in a slow circle, trying to process everything. "This is too much. I don't need—" "Yes, you do." His voice was gentle but firm. "You are a guest of the Vampire King now, Nora Dalton. You'll be treated accordingly." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I must meet with my council. They'll be displeased with my decision tonight. Rest. I'll send someone to bring you food and answer any questions you might have. Wait." Nora crossed to him quickly. "Will I see you again? Or am I just supposed to stay locked in here for a year?" Something flickered in his crimson eyes, pleasure perhaps, that she wanted to see him again. "You'll see me tomorrow evening. I rise at sunset. Until then, you're free to explore these chambers and recover from tonight's ordeal." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a leaf from her tangled hair. "You were very brave, Nora. Your brother is fortunate to have such devotion." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, and Nora was alone in a vampire's palace beneath the earth. She waited until his footsteps faded before her legs gave out and she sank onto the edge of the enormous bed, her whole body beginning to shake as the reality of what had happened crashed over her. She'd bargained her life away. She was trapped in an underground city full of vampires for an entire year. Felix was safe, but she was here, and what if Vladimir's protection wasn't enough? What if the other vampires decided she looked like a tasty snack? The shaking intensified until her teeth were chattering, and she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold it together. She'd been so focused on saving Felix that she hadn't let herself think about what she was agreeing to. A year, 365 days with creatures that drank blood and could kill her with a casual flick of their fingers. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "See, come in," she called, hating how her voice wavered. A female vampire entered, carrying a tray laden with food. She was stunning, like all the vampires Nora had seen, white blonde hair braided elegantly, pale skin that seemed to glow, crimson eyes that assessed Nora with cool intelligence. She wore modern clothing, dark jeans, and a fitted shirt that somehow looked regal on her. "I am Lysandra," she said, her voice accented differently than Vladimir's. "I serve as the king's seneschal. He's asked me to see to your comfort and answer your questions." She set the tray on a low table near the fireplace, and Nora saw it held bread, cheese, fruits, and what looked like wine. Her stomach growled despite her fear, reminding her she hadn't eaten since breakfast. "Thank you," Nora said quietly, moving to the table. "I appreciate it." Lysandra studied her with those unsettling crimson eyes as Nora began to eat. "You're the human who bargained for her brother's life," she said finally. "The whole court is talking about it. Many think the king has gone mad, bringing you here." Nora swallowed a bite of bread with difficulty. "What do you think?" A small smile curved Lysandra's pale lips. "I think you must be very brave or very foolish, perhaps both." She settled into a chair with inhuman grace. "I've served Vladimir for 70 years, and I've never seen him spare a hunter's life. Whatever you did tonight, whatever he saw in you, it's unprecedented." "I didn't do anything special," Nora said. "I just love my brother." "Love." Lysandra said the word as if testing its weight. "We vampires remember love. We're not heartless creatures, no matter what your stories say. But we live so long that emotions can become muted." Seeing such fierce devotion from a human, she trailed off, shaking her head. The king was moved. I could tell when he returned. It's been a very long time since anything moved him. Nora took a sip of wine, letting its warmth spread through her. Can I ask you something? Am I actually safe here? He promised his protection. But the king's word is absolute law in this court, Lysandra interrupted firmly. If Vladimir has declared you under his protection, then you are safer than you would be in your own world. Any vampire who harmed you would face his wrath, and trust me when I say that is not a fate anyone here would court. She leaned forward slightly. However, I'd advise you to stay within the palace grounds until you better understand our ways. The Undercity is vast, and not all vampires are as controlled as those in the king's inner circle. Nora nodded slowly, filing that information away. What will he expect from me? He said I'm his ward, that I'll need to attend him sometimes, but what does that actually mean? It means you are his responsibility and his companion, Lysandra explained. You'll likely accompany him to court functions, dine with him when he wishes company, perhaps assist with tasks that require a human touch. We still conduct business with the human world after all, and having a human liaison can be useful. Her expression softened slightly. He won't hurt you, child. Vladimir is ancient and powerful and sometimes ruthless, but he's also honorable. If he's given his word, he'll keep it. They talked for another hour, Lysandra patiently answering Nora's questions about vampire society, the rules of the court, what was expected of her. By the time the female vampire left, Nora felt slightly less terrified and slightly more grounded in this strange new reality. She explored her chambers, finding the wardrobe Vladimir had mentioned filled with beautiful clothes in her size. How had they known? And the bathroom beyond equipped with a huge bathtub and soaps that smelled of lavender and vanilla. She drew a bath, soaking away the grime and fear of the forest, and tried not to think about the fact that she was bathing in a vampire's palace. Finally, exhausted beyond measure, she crawled into the enormous bed and was shocked by how comfortable it was, how the silk sheets felt like water against her skin. She expected to lie awake for hours, anxious and afraid, but sleep claimed her almost instantly. She dreamed of crimson eyes and a blade falling to the forest floor, of a voice promising protection, of pale hands gentle against her skin. When she woke, disoriented and confused, it took her a moment to remember where she was. Sunlight or something that looked like it filtered through the windows, though she knew they were deep underground. Magic, she supposed. Everything here was magic. A note had been slipped under her door while she slept, written in elegant script. When you wake, ring the bell. Someone will bring you breakfast and help you prepare for the evening. I look forward to seeing you at sunset. Venora's heart did something complicated in her chest as she read his words. She told herself it was anxiety, nothing more. Certainly not excitement. She barely knew the vampire king. He'd spared her life and her brother's, yes, but he was still a vampire, still dangerous, still utterly inhuman. So why did her pulse quicken at the thought of seeing him again? She rang the bell as instructed, and a young vampire appeared with breakfast, more bread and fruit, along with something that looked like coffee but tasted richer, smoother. Another vampire came to help her dress, a male this time who introduced himself as Corentin and who had an easy smile that almost made him seem human. The kings ask that you wear something formal tonight, Corentin explained, pulling a deep blue gown from the wardrobe. He's holding court, and you'll be presented officially to the coven. Nora's stomach dropped. Presented? Like I'm on display? More like you're being introduced as a protected member of this household, Corentin said gently. It's important that everyone understands your status here. Otherwise, some of the younger, more reckless vampires might see you as fair game. Right, because she was human, and humans were food. Nora swallowed hard and nodded. Okay, help me get ready then. Corentin proved to be an excellent lady's maid, helping Nora into the gown and styling her dark hair into an elegant updo that left a few tendrils framing her face. He even provided cosmetics, showing her how to apply them to best effect. When he finally led her to a mirror, Nora barely recognized herself. The girl in the reflection looked regal, almost ethereal in the sapphire gown. Her brown eyes seemed larger, more luminous. She looked like she could belong in a vampire's court, at least superficially. Beautiful, Corentin declared. The king will be pleased. The king's opinion doesn't matter, Nora said, more sharply than she intended. Corentin's smile was knowing. Of course not. Come, it's nearly sunset. We should go to the throne room. The throne room was everything Nora expected and more enormous, carved from the same black stone as the rest of the palace, lit by hundreds of blue flames that cast dancing shadows across the floor. Vampires lined the walls, all of them dressed formally, all of them turning to stare as Corentin led her inside. At the far end of the room, elevated on a dais, sat a throne carved from a single piece of obsidian, and on that throne, looking every inch the ancient king he was, sat Vladimir. He wore black as he had the night before, But now it was formal attire, a long coat over a silk shirt, fitted trousers tucked into tall boots. His white hair was unbound, falling around his shoulders like a waterfall of moonlight, and his crimson eyes fixed on Nora the moment she entered. Something passed between them, a spark, a connection, a recognition that neither of them could name. Nora felt it like a physical touch, and from the way Vladimir's hands tightened on the arms of his throne, he felt it too. Cornton bowed low and retreated, leaving Nora to walk the long aisle between staring vampires alone. She lifted her chin, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed, and walked steadily toward the throne. When she reached the dais, she wasn't sure whether to bow or curtsy or what, so she simply stood there, meeting Vladimir's gaze with as much composure as she could manage. "Nora Dalton," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber with commanding authority. "Welcome formally to my court." He rose from his throne with fluid grace and descended the steps to stand before her. Up close, she could see details she'd missed last night: the sharp line of his jaw, the elegant length of his fingers, the way his eyes seemed to glow with their own inner light. "Vampires of the Northern Coven," Vladimir announced, turning to address the assembled court while keeping one hand extended toward Nora. "I present to you Nora Dalton, who has entered into a bargain with me under the ancient laws. For 1 year she is my ward and is under my direct protection. Any who harm her will answer to me personally. Any who disrespect me. She is to be treated with the courtesy due to a member of my household. Is this understood?" A murmur of assent rippled through the room, though Nora could see displeasure on many of the pale faces surrounding them. One vampire stepped forward, older than most, with silver-white hair and cold eyes. "My lord, if I may speak?" "Lord Cassian." Vladimir's tone was neutral. "You may." "The human's brother killed 2 of our kind," Cassian said, his voice hard. "Young ones, barely a century old. And yet you spare him and bring his sister here as a guest? Many in this court see this as weakness, my lord, as a betrayal of our laws." Vladimir's expression didn't change, but Nora felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. "The human's brother was avenged through the ancient rite of exchange," he said softly, dangerously. "Nora Dalton offered her life freely in place of his. That is our law, Cassian. Older than you, older than me. Would you have me violate laws that have governed our kind since the first vampire walked this earth?" Cassian's jaw tightened. "Of course not, my lord. But to bring her here, to give her such status, is my decision as your king." The words cracked like a whip. "Do you challenge it?" The threat in those words was unmistakable. Cassian bowed stiffly. "No, my lord. I merely express concerns that others share. Your concerns are noted." Vladimir moved to stand beside Nora, close enough that she could feel the coolness radiating from his body. "But my decision stands. Nora Dalton is under my protection. Anyone who questions that questions me." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Finally, Cassian bowed again and retreated into the crowd. Vladimir turned back to Nora and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Come," he said quietly, offering her his arm. "We have much to discuss, and I'd prefer to do so away from eager ears." Nora took his arm, acutely aware of every vampire eye following them as Vladimir led her from the throne room through a side door. They walked in silence through opulent corridors until they reached what appeared to be a private study smaller than the other rooms, more intimate, with shelves of ancient books and a desk covered in papers. "I apologize for Cassian," Vladimir said once the door was closed behind them. "He's old and set in his ways, and he sees anything new as a threat. He's not wrong, though, is he?" Nora moved to examine the books, needing something to do with her hands. "By your laws, my brother should be dead, and me along with him, probably, perhaps." Vladimir leaned against his desk, watching her with those unsettling eyes. "But laws exist to serve justice, not cruelty. Your brother was foolish and reckless, but he was also grieving and manipulated. And you," he paused, seeming to search for words. "You showed a kind of courage I haven't seen in a very long time. That deserves recognition, not death." Nora pulled a book from the shelf at random, running her fingers over its aged leather binding. "What happens now? You've presented me to your court. I'm officially your ward. What does my life look like for the next year?" "That depends largely on you," Vladimir said. "I won't force you to do anything you're uncomfortable with. But I would like." He hesitated, and Nora realized with surprise that he seemed almost uncertain. "I would like for you to spend time with me. To talk. To help me understand the human world better, perhaps. It's been a very long time since I had a companion who wasn't vampire." "You're lonely," Nora said, the realization striking her with surprising force. His expression flickered surprise, perhaps a touch of pain. "I am ancient and powerful and have hundreds of subjects who would die at my command. Loneliness should be impossible, but it's not." She set the book down and turned to face him fully. "Being surrounded by people who fear you, who obey you because they have to, that's not the same as having real connection, is it?" For a long moment, Vladimir simply stared at her. Then slowly a smile curved his pale lips, not the cold, regal expression she'd seen before, but something warmer, more genuine. "You're perceptive," he said softly, "and correct. I have lived 347 years, Nora Dalton, and I cannot remember the last time someone spoke to me with such honesty." He pushed away from the desk, moving closer to her. "Will you have dinner with me tonight? Not as ward and king, but simply as two people sharing a meal." Her heart was doing that complicated thing again, beating too fast, fluttering in her chest like a trapped bird. She should say no, should maintain distance between them. He was a vampire, an ancient creature who drank blood to survive, and she was his prisoner no matter how prettily he dressed it up. But when she looked into his crimson eyes, she didn't see a monster. She saw someone who'd spared her brother's life, who'd given his word and kept it, who'd protected her in front of his entire court. She saw loneliness that matched her own, because wasn't she lonely too? Hadn't she been lonely since her parents died, caring for Felix while he spiraled into obsession, trying to hold together a life that kept fracturing? "Yes," she heard herself say. "I'll have dinner with you." The smile that lit Vladimir's face was breathtaking. "Good," he said simply. "I'll have something prepared. Come." He led her to a smaller room with a table set for two, already laden with food, human food. She was pleased to see, though she wondered what he would eat. The answer came when he poured wine for both of them, but his glass was darker, richer, and when she caught the scent, she realized with a jolt that it was blood. "I apologize," Vladimir said, catching her expression. "I should have warned you. I can dine elsewhere if it disturbs you." "No." Nora forced herself to relax, to remember that this was his nature, no different than her needing regular food. "It's fine. I just wasn't expecting it." They sat, and for a while they ate in comfortable silence. Then Vladimir asked, "Tell me about your life, before your brother's obsession, before you ended up in my forest." So Nora told him. About growing up in a small apartment with parents who loved them fiercely but struggled to make ends meet. About her mother's illness, the medical bills that drained their savings. Her father's heart attack a year later, that the doctors said was brought on by stress. About trying to raise Felix alone, watching him slip away into anger and conspiracy theories about vampires being responsible for every human tragedy. "I tried to pull him back," she said quietly, pushing food around her plate, "but he wouldn't listen. He started training, buying weapons, talking about being a hunter like it was some noble calling. I was terrified he'd get himself killed." She looked up at Vladimir. "Turns out I was right to be afraid, and yet you saved him," Vladimir said. "At great cost to yourself. He's my brother. I couldn't let him die." "That fierce loyalty," Vladimir murmured. "It's admirable and rare. In my world, family bonds often weaken over centuries. We live so long that relationships become transactional." He swirled the blood wine in his glass. "But you humans, with your brief lives you burn so brightly. You love so intensely because you know how little time you have. Is that why you spared me?" Nora asked. "Because I reminded you of something you'd lost?" Vladimir was quiet for a long moment. "Perhaps," he admitted finally. "Or perhaps I was simply tired of being the monster everyone expects me to be." His crimson eyes met hers. "When you ran toward me instead of away, when you offered yourself so fearlessly, I saw myself through your eyes in that moment, and I didn't like what I saw." "I don't think you're a monster," Nora said softly. "You barely know me. I know you kept your word. I know you could have killed Felix and me both, and no one would have questioned it. I know you've protected me even though your court thinks you're weak for it." She leaned forward slightly. "Those aren't the actions of a monster." Something shifted in Vladimir's expression, a softening, a vulnerability that transformed his austere features into something achingly beautiful. "You see goodness where most see only darkness," he said. "I'm not certain I deserve such faith." "Maybe not," Nora agreed. "But you have it anyway." They talked late into the night, long after the food was gone and the wine drunk. Vladimir told her about his human life. So long ago it was like listening to a history book come to life. He'd been a soldier, turned against his will during a battle, left to learn what he'd become on his own. He spoke of the early years of confusion and horror, slowly giving way to acceptance and then to power as he learned to navigate vampire society. "I never wanted to be king," he admitted. "But power attracts power, and eventually I was strong enough that others followed me. The Northern Coven formed around me almost by accident." He smiled wryly. "Now I'm bound by duty to creatures who fear me more than they respect me, making decisions that affect hundreds of lives, and I can't remember the last time I did something simply because I wanted to." "What would you do?" Nora asked. "If you could do anything." He considered this, his expression distant. "I'd travel. See the world the way humans see it, not hidden in shadows and underground cities. I'd watch a sunrise without pain." His voice grew quieter. "I'd feel warmth again. Real warmth, not just the memory of it." The sadness in his words broke something in Nora's chest. She reached across the table without thinking, placing her hand over his where it rested on the polished wood. His skin was cool but not unpleasantly so, and at her touch he went very still. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry for what was taken from you. Vladimir stared at their joined hands, and when he looked up at her, his eyes were bright with an emotion she couldn't name. Don't apologize for something that happened 3 centuries ago. I've made my peace with what I am. Have you? Nora challenged gently. Because it doesn't sound like peace to me. He laughed, a soft sound of surprise. You're dangerous, Nora Dalton. You see too much, too clearly. Is that a bad thing? No, he said, turning his hand over so their palms pressed together. His fingers were long and elegant, wrapping around hers with careful strength. No, I think perhaps it's exactly what I need. The air between them felt charged, heavy with possibility. Nora knew she should pull her hand away, should maintain the distance appropriate between a vampire king and his human ward. But she didn't want to. For the first time since her parents died, since Felix started spiraling, since her entire life became about survival and sacrifice, she wanted something just for herself. And what she wanted, terrifyingly, was to know this vampire better. To understand the man behind the crown, the person who'd lived 347 years and was still capable of mercy and loneliness and hope. They stayed like that for a moment that felt eternal. Hands clasped across the table, eyes locked, both of them balanced on the edge of something neither quite understood. Finally, Vladimir gently released her hand and stood. It's late, he said, his voice slightly rough. I should let you rest. Nora stood as well, suddenly reluctant to leave. Will I see you tomorrow? Would you like to? Yes, no hesitation this time. The smile he gave her was soft, genuine, and utterly breathtaking. Then yes, tomorrow evening. We could walk through the gardens if you'd like. They're quite beautiful. I'd like that, Nora said. He walked her back to her chambers, and at her door he paused. For a moment she thought he might kiss her hand or offer some other formal gesture, but instead he simply said, Sleep well, Nora. You're safe here. I know, she said, and realized she meant it. The days began to fall into a pattern after that. Nora would wake to breakfast and spend her mornings exploring her chambers, reading from the extensive library Vladimir had given her access to, or talking with Lysandra or Corentin, who became something like friends. In the evenings, once Vladimir rose, they would spend time together walking the gardens, dining in his private rooms, talking about everything and nothing. She learned about vampire politics, the delicate balance of power between the 7 covens, the ancient laws that governed their kind. She learned that Vladimir was considered one of the most powerful vampire kings alive, that his word held weight even in courts far from his own. She learned that he was also considered cold, ruthless, feared rather than loved by his subjects. But with her he was different, warm in his way, curious and engaged, asking her questions about the modern human world, laughing at her stories about the frustrations of technology and social media. He was surprisingly easy to talk to, despite the vast gulf of years and experience between them. And slowly, carefully, something began to grow between them. Something neither of them named, but both felt a connection that went deeper than ward and protector, human and vampire. It was in the way his eyes would seek her out in a crowded room, the way she found herself thinking of him during the day, anticipating the evening when they'd see each other again. It was in the careful way he touched her hand when helping her over uneven ground in the gardens, in the way she'd started to notice small details about him, the precise way he smiled when genuinely amused, the slight accent that grew stronger when he was tired, the elegant strength of his hands. 3 weeks into her stay, Vladimir asked her to accompany him to a formal gathering with representatives from the Eastern Coven. She wore a gown of deep emerald that Lysandra had helped her choose, and when Vladimir saw her, he stopped mid-sentence in his conversation with Corentin. You look stunning, he said simply. Nora felt heat rise to her cheeks. Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself. He was wearing formal court attire again, all black and silver, his white hair bound back with a silver clasp. He looked every inch the ancient king, powerful and intimidating and beautiful in an otherworldly way that made her breath catch. The gathering was held in one of the palace's grand ballrooms, and Nora was surprised to find it wasn't the stuffy political affair she'd feared. There was music, a vampire with a cello playing something hauntingly beautiful, and dancing and sophisticated conversation. The Eastern Coven representatives were curious about her but polite, asking questions about human society that she did her best to answer. Throughout it all, Vladimir stayed close to her side, one hand resting lightly at the small of her back in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. She could feel other vampires watching them, could sense speculation and gossip, but she found she didn't care. Let them talk. She was safe here, with him. Late in the evening, a vampire approached them, a female with silver white hair and eyes like chips of ice. She was beautiful, but there was something predatory in the way she moved that made Nora's instincts scream danger. Vladimir, the female said, her voice like silk over steel. You've been hiding from me all evening, Serafina. Vladimir's tone was neutral, carefully polite. I trust you're finding the gathering acceptable? It would be more acceptable if you'd grant me a dance. Serafina's eyes slid to Nora with barely concealed disdain. Surely your little human pet can spare you for a few moments? Nora felt her spine stiffen at the dismissive words, but before she could respond, Vladimir's hand tightened at her back. Nora is my honored guest, not a pet, he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous softness she'd learned meant he was furious. And I'm afraid I must decline your invitation, Serafina. I'm engaged for the evening. Serafina's perfect features twisted briefly before smoothing back into a mask of civility. Of course, how could I forget the great Vladimir, fallen so low as to keep a human at his side like a lapdog? She smiled coldly. The other covens are talking, you know. They say you've gone soft, that you're so desperate for companionship you've taken up with prey. The temperature in the immediate area dropped sharply, and several nearby vampires quickly moved away. Vladimir's crimson eyes blazed with barely controlled rage. Careful, Serafina, he said, each word precise as a blade. You're a guest in my court. That grants you certain protections, but insulting my honor and Nora's tests the limits of even my hospitality. Truth isn't an insult, darling. Serafina's smile widened. We all see what's happening here. You're infatuated with a human girl who'll be dead in the blink of an eye, cosmically speaking. It's pathetic. Before Vladimir could respond, Nora stepped forward, placing herself between them. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. If it's so pathetic, why do you care? She asked. Why does my presence here threaten you so much? Serafina's eyes narrowed dangerously. You dare, I dare, Nora interrupted. Because I'm under Vladimir's protection, which means I have the right to speak in his court. And what I see is a vampire so insecure in her own worth that she has to tear down others to feel powerful. That's pathetic if you ask me. The silence that fell was absolute. Somewhere in the background, the cello had stopped playing. Every vampire in the room was staring at them, and Nora realized belatedly that she'd just insulted a probably very powerful vampire in front of witnesses. But Serafina didn't attack. Instead, after a moment of shocked silence, she laughed a cold, bitter sound. Well, she said, the pet has teeth, how delightful. She turned her gaze back to Vladimir. Enjoy your human while she lasts, Vladimir. We both know how fragile they are. Then she swept away, disappearing into the crowd. Nora let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, her entire body trembling with post-adrenaline reaction. Vladimir's hand settled on her shoulders, steadying her. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, he murmured in her ear. Probably both, Nora admitted. Did I just make things worse? No. His hands tightened briefly on her shoulders before he turned her to face him. You defended my honor and your own. That takes courage, especially against someone like Serafina. His expression was complicated pride mixed with concern. But she's right about one thing. Other covens are talking. They see you as a weakness they can exploit. Are you having second thoughts about bringing me here? Nora asked quietly. Never. The word was fierce, absolute. You're the best thing that's happened to me in longer than I can remember, Nora. I won't apologize for that, and I won't hide it. He offered her his hand. Dance with me? She shouldn't. She should maintain distance, remember that she was here because of a bargain, that this was temporary, that in less than a year she'd return to her human life, and Vladimir would continue on for centuries without her. But his hand was extended, and his eyes were soft with something she was starting to recognize, and she couldn't bring herself to refuse. Yes, she said, placing her hand in his. He led her to the center of the ballroom as the cello began to play again, a slow, haunting melody. Other vampires moved aside, giving them space, and then Vladimir's arm was around her waist and they were moving together, swaying in time to the music. He was an excellent dancer, of course he was. He'd had 3 centuries to practice, but it was more than that. They fit together perfectly, her head just reaching his shoulder, their bodies aligned as if they'd been made to move in tandem. His hand at her waist was cool through the fabric of her gown, but she found she didn't mind. She was getting used to his particular kind of cold, the way it never quite felt wrong, just different. You're thinking very hard about something, Vladimir murmured as they turned. I'm thinking that I like this, Nora admitted. Dancing with you. Being here, and that scares me. Why? She looked up at him, meeting those crimson eyes directly. Because this is temporary. Because in 11 months I'll leave and you'll stay here, and this, she gestured between them. Whatever this is, it can't go anywhere. You're a 300-year-old vampire king, and I'm just a human girl who made a desperate bargain. Vladimir was quiet for a long moment, guiding them through the dance with practiced ease. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, meant only for her ears. What if I don't want it to be temporary? Nora's heart stuttered. What if? He continued, his eyes never leaving hers. I want you to stay? Not as my ward, not because of some bargain, but because He paused, seeming to search for words. Because in 3 weeks, you've brought more light into my life than I've had in 3 centuries. Because I look forward to sunset now, knowing I'll see you. Because when Serafina called you pathetic, I wanted to tear out her throat for daring to disrespect you. Nora's voice came out breathless. I'm not asking for an answer now, he said quickly. I know this is complicated. I know the vast differences between us. But I need you to know you're not just a bargain to me, Nora. You haven't been for a while now. The music swelled around them, and Nora felt like her entire world was tilting on its axis. She'd been so focused on surviving her year, on protecting Felix, on not thinking about what came after she hadn't let herself acknowledge what was growing between them. Hadn't let herself name the flutter in her chest when he smiled, the way her day felt incomplete until she saw him, the increasing rightness she felt in his presence. I care about you too, she whispered. More than I should, more than is safe. Safe is overrated, Vladimir said, a smile ghosting across his lips. Then his expression sobered. But I won't push. I won't ask for more than you're willing to give. Just stay open to the possibility, please. The dance ended and they stood in the center of the ballroom with vampires watching from all sides. Nora knew she should step back, put proper distance between them, but she couldn't bring herself to move. I'm already more open than I should be, she admitted quietly. You terrify me, Vladimir. Not because I think you'll hurt me, but because I'm falling for you, and I don't know how that can possibly work. His expression transformed joy and wonder into something fiercer, more possessive. Then we'll figure it out, he said simply, together. The rest of the gathering passed in a blur. Nora was introduced to more vampires, fielded more questions, accepted more thinly veiled hostility from those who saw her as an unwelcome intrusion. But through it all, Vladimir stayed at her side, his presence a constant reassurance, and when they finally retreated to his private study afterward, she felt exhausted but oddly exhilarated. You handled yourself brilliantly tonight, Vladimir said, pouring them both drinks wine for her, blood wine for him. Serafina is notoriously difficult and you faced her down without flinching. I was definitely flinching on the inside, Nora said, accepting the glass gratefully. Who is she exactly? An ex-lover? Vladimir made a face. We had a brief entanglement about 50 years ago. It ended poorly, and she's been attempting to rekindle it ever since. He settled into a chair across from her. She's powerful within the Eastern Coven, which makes her politically important, but she's also vindictive and cruel. I should have handled her better, but when she insulted you, his jaw tightened. I saw red, my hero, Nora said, only half teasing. Then, more seriously, thank you for defending me, for making it clear I'm not just food to you. You could never be just food, Vladimir said quietly. He paused, seemed to consider his words carefully. You're becoming essential to me, Nora, and that's terrifying in its own way. I've lived so long without needing anyone. Becoming attached to you, knowing your life is a fraction of mine, it's the most frightening thing I've experienced in centuries. Nora set down her wine and crossed to him, kneeling beside his chair so they were at eye level. I'm scared too, she said softly. But I don't want fear to stop me from exploring this, whatever this is. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his cool palm. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. You're so warm, he murmured, so alive. Sometimes I forget what that's like, life that burns instead of endures. Then let me remind you, Nora whispered, and before she could lose her courage, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. For a moment, Vladimir went absolutely still, shocked into immobility. Then his hand slid into her hair and he was kissing her back with a hunger that stole her breath. His lips were cool but not unpleasantly so, moving against hers with 3 centuries of skill and current, desperate need. She felt his other hand come to rest at her waist, pulling her closer, and she went willingly, her hands finding his shoulders and holding on. The kiss deepened, became something urgent and wild. Nora could feel his restraint, the careful control he maintained even in passion, making sure not to hurt her with his superior strength. That care, that consideration even in the midst of desire, made her heart ache. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she was breathing hard. He didn't technically need to. Vladimir rested his forehead against hers. That was, he seemed at a loss for words. Nora agreed breathlessly. It was. He laughed, a sound of pure joy that transformed his austere features into something young and carefree. I haven't kissed anyone in decades. I'd forgotten how extraordinary it could be. Decades? Nora pulled back to look at him properly. Really? Vampire relationships are often political or purely physical, he explained. Real connection is rare, and I'm a king, which makes genuine intimacy nearly impossible. Everyone wants something from me. His crimson eyes were soft as they searched her face. But you don't want anything except honesty and protection for your brother. You don't fear me, but you don't try to use me either. Do you understand how precious that is? I'm starting to, Nora said quietly. They stayed like that for a while, wrapped in each other's arms in the quiet of his study, and Nora felt something shift and settle in her chest. This was real. This terrifying, impossible thing growing between them was real, and she was choosing it despite all the reasons she shouldn't. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Nora could remember. She and Vladimir spent every evening together, growing closer with each conversation, each shared smile, each stolen kiss in shadowed alcoves. They walked the underground gardens and talked about philosophy and history. They attended court functions together, presenting a united front against those who still saw Nora as an unwelcome intruder. They lay together in his study with her reading and him handling correspondence, comfortable in shared silence. Lysandra watched their growing relationship with knowing eyes. "He's different with you," she told Nora one afternoon. "Lighter. More like the vampire I remember from decades ago, before the weight of the crown made him so serious." "Am I causing problems for him?" Nora asked, worried. "With the other covens, I mean." "Some," Lysandra admitted, "but not more than he can handle, and honestly, I think he needs you more than he needs their approval." She smiled. "You're good for him, Nora, don't doubt that." Corentin was even more supportive, actively helping Nora learn vampire etiquette and customs so she could navigate court society more effectively. "The king is in love with you," he said bluntly one day while helping her dress for another formal event. "Everyone can see it. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I love him too," Nora admitted quietly. "But I don't know how this can work long term. I'm human. I'll age and die while he stays exactly as he is." Corentin's expression was thoughtful. "There are options," he said carefully, "if you wanted to explore them." "You mean being turned?" Nora had thought about it, late at night when she couldn't sleep. The idea of becoming vampire, of living forever at Vladimir's side. "I don't know if I could do that. Give up sunlight, give up being human." "It's not a decision to make lightly," Corentin agreed. "But it's worth thinking about. If you love him, if you want a future with him, mortality becomes a problem eventually." She knew he was right, but the thought still terrified her. She wasn't ready to make that choice, wasn't ready to give up her humanity. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she also wasn't ready to give up Vladimir. 2 months into her stay, everything changed. Nora woke one morning to urgent knocking on her door. She stumbled out of bed, confused. It was early afternoon, well before sunset, and no one usually disturbed her during the day. She opened the door to find Lysandra, her expression grim. "It's your brother," Lysandra said without preamble. "He's in the city, with other hunters. They're planning an attack on the Undercity." Nora's blood went cold. "What? How do you know?" "We have informants in the human world. They reported a group of hunters gathering weapons, talking about a vampire nest beneath the city. Your brother is leading them." Lysandra's crimson eyes were sympathetic but serious. "If they attack Nora, the king will have no choice but to defend his people. The bargain you made protected Felix as long as he didn't harm vampires again. If he attacks, the deal is void," Nora finished, her stomach dropping. "He'll be killed." "Yes, along with anyone with him." Lysandra hesitated. "The king doesn't know yet. He's still sleeping. He won't rise for another few hours. But when he finds out, I have to stop Felix," Nora said immediately. "Before Vladimir wakes. Before anyone gets hurt. You can't go alone, I have to." Nora was already moving, pulling on clothes with shaking hands. "Felix won't listen to vampires, but he might listen to me. If I can get to him before the attack. If you leave the Undercity without the king's permission, without his protection, you'll be vulnerable," Lysandra warned. "There are vampires who would love an excuse to harm you." "I don't care." Nora's voice was firm despite her fear. "I won't let Felix throw his life away. I won't let him force Vladimir to kill him. I have to try." Lysandra studied her for a long moment, then nodded sharply. "I'll help you get topside. But you need to be back before sunset, Nora. The king will be furious if he wakes to find you gone." They moved quickly through the winding corridors of the Undercity, Lysandra leading Nora through passages she'd never seen before. Other vampires were sleeping, resting through the daylight hours, and the underground city was quieter than Nora had ever experienced. Finally, they reached one of the hidden exits, and Lysandra pulled her into a quick embrace. "Be careful," the female vampire said. "And come back. The king needs you." "I will," Nora promised. And then she was climbing the tunnel toward the surface, her heart pounding with fear and determination. She emerged into late afternoon sunlight, blinking against the brightness after weeks in the perpetual twilight of the Undercity. The forest looked different in daylight, less ominous, almost peaceful. But she didn't have time to appreciate it. She knew where Felix would be. There was an old warehouse on the edge of the city where he'd taken her once, back when his hunting obsession was just beginning. He'd said it was a perfect staging ground, abandoned and private. She ran through the streets, drawing stares from passers-by, a girl in expensive clothing running like her life depended on it, but she didn't care. She had to reach Felix, had to make him understand. The warehouse came into view, and she could see vehicles parked outside, shadows moving within. She burst through the door without hesitation, and suddenly she was facing a dozen armed men and women, all of them turning to stare at her in shock. And there, in the center of them, looking older and harder than when she'd seen him last, was Felix. "Nora?" He stared at her like she was a ghost. What? How did you? You have to stop this, she gasped out, her chest heaving. Felix, please, if you attack the Undercity, you'll all die, and you'll force Vladimir to kill you, which will destroy the bargain I made. Please, you have to stop. The vampire got to her, one of the hunters said, raising a crossbow. She's compromised. Nobody shoots my sister, Felix snapped, moving to stand between Nora and the hunters. Then, to her, Nora, I've been trying to find you for 2 months. We're not here to attack, we're here to rescue you. To get you away from that monster. He's not a monster. The words burst from Nora with fierce intensity. Felix, he's kind and protective, and he's kept every promise he made. I'm safe there. I'm happy there. Happy? Felix looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Nora, he's a vampire. A creature that drinks blood to survive. You can't possibly. I love him, Nora said, and realized as she spoke the words that they were absolutely true. I'm in love with Vladimir, Felix, and if you attack his home, if you harm his people, you'll be hurting me too. The warehouse fell silent. Felix's face cycled through several emotions: shock, betrayal, anger, confusion. He's done something to you, he said finally. Some kind of vampire mind control. There's no mind control, Nora interrupted. I know what I feel, I know what I want, and I'm begging you, as your sister who loves you, don't do this. Don't attack the Undercity. We have intelligence. Another hunter spoke up, a woman with hard eyes. That nest has killed humans. They're monsters, all of them. Some vampires are monsters, Nora agreed. Just like some humans are monsters, but not all of them. Not Vladimir, not the vampires in his court who've been kind to me. She turned back to Felix. You started this because you thought vampires killed Mom and Dad. But they didn't, Felix. Mom died of cancer. Dad died of a heart attack. Terrible, unfair, but not supernatural. You've been hunting shadows, and now you're about to get yourself and all these people killed for nothing. She's lying, the hard-eyed woman said. Protecting her vampire lover. I'm protecting my brother, Nora said sharply. And all of you. Because if you attack, you won't win. Vladimir is 300 years old and more powerful than you can imagine, and he's not even the strongest vampire in that city. You'll die, all of you. And for what? Revenge against creatures who never hurt you? Felix was staring at her, conflict written across his features. I've been so worried, he said quietly. Every day, thinking you were suffering, being held prisoner. I was a prisoner at first, Nora admitted. But it became something else, something better. I've found a place there, Felix. People who care about me, and someone I care about deeply. She reached out, taking her brother's hands. I only have 10 more months in the Undercity, and then I can come back topside if I want. But if you attack now, both our lives are forfeit. Please, stand down, go home. Let me finish what I started. 10 months, Felix echoed. And then you'll come back, Nora hesitated. Would she? If Vladimir asked her to stay, would she choose him over returning to her human life? She didn't know, but she couldn't think about that now. We'll figure it out when the time comes, she said. But first you have to promise me no attack. No more hunting. Please, Felix. Her brother looked at the hunters around them, then back at her. She could see him warring with himself, his protective instincts fighting against the evidence of his own eyes that she was healthy, well-dressed, clearly not being mistreated. Stand down, he said finally to the group. Mission's off. You can't be serious, the hard-eyed woman started. I said stand down. Felix's voice cracked like a whip. This is my sister, and if she says she's safe, I believe her. We're not attacking today. There was grumbling, angry looks, but gradually the hunters began to lower their weapons. Nora felt relief flood through her so intensely she thought her knees might give out. Thank you, she whispered to Felix. He pulled her into a fierce hug. I love you, Nora, and I trust you even when you're making insane choices. But if that vampire ever hurts you, he won't, Nora said firmly. I promise. They talked for a few more minutes, Nora assuring Felix she was well treated, Felix promising to stay away from vampire hunting. Finally, reluctantly, he let her go, and she began the journey back to the Undercity entrance. She was halfway there when she felt a presence behind her, moving with supernatural speed. She spun around to find Serafina blocking her path, her ice-chip eyes gleaming with malice. Well, well, the vampire purred. The little human all alone in broad daylight. How convenient. Nora's heart jumped into her throat. I'm under Vladimir's protection. You can't touch me, can't I? Serafina tilted her head, a predator sizing up prey. You left the Undercity without permission, without guards. That rather voids your protection, doesn't it? Lysandra, help me. Lysandra isn't king. Serafina moved closer, faster than Nora could track, and suddenly cold fingers were wrapped around her throat. Not squeezing, not yet, but the threat was clear. You've been a thorn in my side since you arrived, human. Vladimir's little obsession. Do you know how many in the other covens would thank me for removing you? If you kill me, Vladimir will destroy you, Nora managed, fear making her voice shake. Perhaps, Serafina agreed, but perhaps he'll realize I've done him a favor. Freed him from his pathetic attachment to a mortal who'll be dead in a heartbeat anyway. Her grip tightened slightly. Either way, you won't be around to see it. Nora struggled, but it was like fighting marble. Serafina didn't even seem to notice her efforts. This was it, she realized with creeping horror. She'd survived weeks in the vampire court only to die in a forest in broad daylight, killed by a jealous vampire while trying to save her brother. But then a roar that shook the trees, a blur of white and black, and suddenly Serafina was thrown backward with enough force to crater the ground where she landed. Vladimir stood between them, his white hair wild, his crimson eyes blazing with fury, and he was terrifying, more terrifying than Nora had ever seen him. This was the ancient vampire king in all his power, and the rage rolling off him made the air itself seem to tremble. "You dare," he snarled at Serafina, his voice barely human. "You dare touch what is mine?" Serafina climbed to her feet, looking shaken for the first time since Nora had met her. "My lord," she left without protection. "She was fair game." "She is never fair game," the words cracked like thunder. "She is mine, Serafina. Mine to protect, mine to cherish, mine to love. And you put your hands on her." He moved with blinding speed, and suddenly Serafina was pinned against a tree, Vladimir's hand around her throat just as hers had been around Nora's moments before. "I could kill you for this," he said softly, dangerously. "Ancient law would support me. You attacked a member of my household." "She's just a human," Serafina gasped. "She's everything," Vladimir corrected. "And you will never threaten her again. Do you understand?" Serafina's eyes were wide with fear now, all her earlier bravado gone. "Yes, my lord, I understand." "Good." He released her, let her crumple to the ground. "Get out of my territory. Return to the Eastern Coven and tell them that Nora Dalton is under my personal protection, and anyone who harms her will face my full wrath. Go now." Serafina fled, moving with vampire speed, and then Vladimir was turning to Nora, his expression transforming from fury to desperate concern. "Are you hurt?" He was at her side in an instant, gentle hands checking her throat where Serafina had grabbed her. "Did she?" "I'm fine," Nora said shakily. "You got here in time. How did you know?" "I woke early. Something felt wrong. And when I found you gone," his voice cracked, "Nora, I thought I'd lost you. When I felt vampire presence near you, when I realized you were in danger." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Never again. Never leave without telling me. I can't protect you if I don't know where you are." "I'm sorry," Nora whispered into his chest. "But I had to. Felix was planning to attack the Undercity. I had to stop him." Vladimir pulled back just enough to look at her. "Your brother?" she explained quickly. "The hunters, the planned attack, her desperate attempt to prevent bloodshed." As she spoke, she watched emotions flicker across Vladimir's face: anger, fear, understanding. "You could have been killed," he said when she finished. "By Serafina, by the hunters if they'd decided you were too compromised to trust." "But I wasn't," Nora interrupted. "I'm fine, and Felix has called off the attack. No one has to die." Vladimir closed his eyes, his jaw tight with suppressed emotion. When he opened them again, they were bright with something that looked like tears, though Nora knew vampires couldn't cry. "You are the bravest, most foolish, most magnificent woman I have ever known," he said hoarsely. "And I am so desperately in love with you that it terrifies me." Nora's breath caught. "You love me? How could I not?" His hands came up to frame her face, cool palms against warm cheeks. "You ran toward danger to save your brother. You stood up to Serafina despite your fear. You left the safety of my court to prevent a war. You are courage and compassion incarnate, and I," his voice broke, "I have loved you almost from the moment you screamed 'kill me instead' in that forest. I just didn't have the words for it until now." Tears were streaming down Nora's face now, warm and human and alive. "I love you too," she said. "I love you so much it scares me. Because I don't know how this works, how we can possibly have a future. We'll figure it out," Vladimir said fiercely. "Together, however long you'll have me, I'm yours, Nora, completely, eternally." He kissed her then, there in the forest in the dying afternoon light, and Nora kissed him back with all the love and fear and desperate hope in her heart. His cool lips moved against hers with exquisite tenderness, and she felt something shift and settle in her soul, a sense of rightness, of belonging, of home. When they finally broke apart, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Vladimir held her close, his face buried in her hair. "Come back with me," he murmured. "Please, I need to know you're safe." "Always," Nora promised. "I'll always come back to you." They returned to the Undercity together, Vladimir refusing to let go of her hand the entire way. When they arrived, Lysandra was waiting, her expression worried. "Thank the ancients," she breathed when she saw them. "I've been terrified since you left." "Did you?" "Felix is standing down," Nora assured her. "No attack, everyone's safe." Lysandra sagged with relief, then seemed to notice the way Vladimir was holding Nora, possessive and tender at once, and a smile curved her lips. "I see you two have sorted some things out," she observed. "We have," Vladimir confirmed. Then, to Nora, "I need to address the court. After today, after Serafina's attack, everyone needs to understand exactly what you mean to me." So for the second time, Nora found herself in the throne room with every vampire in the court assembled. But this time Vladimir didn't seat himself on the throne. He stood beside her, their hands clasped, facing his people together. "Vampires of the Northern Coven," he began, his voice carrying through the chamber. "Today, a vampire from the Eastern Coven attacked Nora Dalton while she was in my territory. This is an act of war that I would be within my rights to answer with blood." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "However," Vladimir continued, "I choose mercy this time, because I have more important matters to address." He turned to look at Nora, his crimson eyes soft. "Nora came to my court through a bargain made to save her brother's life. She was to serve as my ward for 1 year. But in the past 2 months she has become far more than that." He squeezed her hand gently before addressing the court again. "I am in love with Nora Dalton," he declared, his voice ringing clear and strong. "She is not my ward, not my servant, not my prey. She is my chosen companion, the woman I intend to keep at my side for as long as she'll have me. Any vampire who disrespects her disrespects me. Any who harm her will die. And any who question my judgment in this matter can challenge me directly." The silence was absolute. Nora could feel hundreds of crimson eyes on them, could sense shock and speculation and, in some cases, grudging respect. Finally, old Cassian stepped forward. "My lord," he said carefully, "do you mean to turn her? To make her vampire?" Vladimir looked at Nora, the question clear in his eyes. She squeezed his hand, trying to communicate what she barely understood herself, that she wasn't ready for that choice, not yet, but that she also wasn't ready to give him up. "That will be Nora's decision," Vladimir said firmly, "and hers alone. For now, she remains human and she remains under my protection. Those are the only facts that matter." Cassian bowed, lower than before. "Then I offer my congratulations, my lord, and my respect to Lady Nora." Other vampires followed suit, bowing or nodding, acknowledging Nora's new status. Not all of them looked happy about it, but they were accepting it, which was more than she dared hope for. When the court finally dispersed, Vladimir led Nora back to his private chambers rooms she'd never seen before, elegant and austere and utterly him. He drew her down to sit beside him on a couch that looked centuries old. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Today has been intense," Nora finished. "Terrifying, wonderful, all of it at once." She turned to face him fully. "You told your entire court you love me." "I do," he said simply. "I'm 347 years old, Nora. I've loved perhaps 3 people in all that time, and never like this. Never with this certainty, this need." He reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "I know we have obstacles. I know you're not ready to make permanent decisions. But I need you to know, however long you give me, I'll treasure it, even if it's just the next 10 months. "What if I want more than 10 months?" Nora asked softly. "What if I want years, decades?" Hope flared in his crimson eyes. "Then I'll give you every moment you ask for, every sunrise you want to see, every human experience you want to keep. I'll find a way to make it work, to give you a life that's both human and mine. And if eventually," she paused, gathering courage, "if eventually I decide I want forever, if I choose to become like you?" Vladimir went very still. "Is that something you're considering?" "I don't know," Nora admitted. "The idea still scares me. Giving up sunlight, giving up being human, it's huge, but losing you scares me more." She took his cool hand in both of hers. "I'm not ready to decide yet, but I want you to know I'm not ruling it out. You're worth considering forever for." The expression on his face was pure wonder. "You honor me," he whispered. "More than you know." He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. "We have time, all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." They stayed like that for a long while, wrapped in each other's arms, finding comfort in closeness. Finally, Nora pulled back with a small smile. "I should probably check in with Felix," she said. "Let him know I'm okay." "Of course." Vladimir rose gracefully. "There's a phone in the study you can use. I'll give you privacy." "Stay," Nora said, catching his hand. "Please, I want you here." So he stayed, sitting beside her while she called her brother on the phone he'd left for her weeks ago, the phone she'd barely touched because there was no one left topside she wanted to talk to. Felix answered on the first ring. "Nora, are you okay? You made it back?" "I'm fine," she assured him. "Safe. Vladimir found me before." She paused, not wanting to worry him with details about Serafina. "Before anything bad could happen. The Vampire King was looking for you?" Felix's voice was wary. "He was worried about me," Nora corrected gently. "Because he cares about me, Felix. The way I care about him." Her brother was quiet for a moment. "You really love him, don't you? This isn't just some survival instinct or Stockholm syndrome?" "I really love him," Nora confirmed, looking at Vladimir as she spoke. "He's good to me, kind and protective, and he makes me happy, Felix. Happier than I've been since Mom and Dad died." Another long pause, then, "Okay, I don't understand it, but I trust you, and I'm glad you're safe." His voice roughened. "I miss you, though." "I miss you too," Nora said honestly. "But I'm where I need to be right now, and you need to move on from this hunting thing. Find something that brings you joy instead of vengeance." "I'm working on it," Felix said. I actually met someone at a coffee shop last week. We've been talking and she's nice. Normal. Makes me think maybe there's more to life than chasing monsters. Relief flooded through Nora. That's wonderful, Felix. What's her name? They talked for a few more minutes, Felix telling her about this new girl Emma, a grad student in literature, and Nora soaking up the sound of her brother's voice, the knowledge that he was moving forward with his life. When they finally hung up, she felt lighter than she had in months. He's doing better, she told Vladimir. Moving on, maybe he'll be okay after all, because of you, Vladimir said. You saved him. Multiple times now. We saved each other, Nora corrected. His obsession brought me to you. In a weird way. So something good came from all of it. Vladimir smiled and pulled her close again, and Nora settled against his chest, listening to the silence where a heartbeat should be. It didn't bother her anymore, the reminders of what he was. If anything, she found them comforting. His particular kind of stillness, his coolness, the way he moved, all of it was Vladimir, and she loved all of it. The remaining months of her bargained year passed in a blur of happiness. Nora learned vampire politics and history, becoming an unofficial advisor to Vladimir on matters concerning the human world. She grew close to Lysandra and Corentin, who became true friends despite the vast differences between them. She attended court functions at Vladimir's side, and gradually even the vampires who'd initially resented her presence began to accept her. Vladimir courted her with old-world elegance, bringing her gifts from the surface world, arranging private concerts with vampire musicians, taking her to see the vast libraries hidden beneath the earth. They spent hours talking, learning each other's histories, dreams, fears. They kissed in shadowed alcoves and held hands during court sessions and fell asleep together with her wrapped in his arms, warm human and cool vampire finding perfect balance. And through it all, Nora thought about forever, about what it would mean to become vampire, to give up her mortality for an eternity with Vladimir. The idea became less frightening and more appealing as the months passed. She loved her humanity, yes, but she loved Vladimir more. 1 month before her bargained year was set to end, Vladimir took her to a place she'd never seen before, the highest point of the Undercity, a balcony carved from living rock that overlooked the entire subterranean world. Below them, the city sparkled with blue flames and vampire life, beautiful and strange and alive in its own way. I used to come here when I first became king, Vladimir said, standing beside her at the railing. When the weight of leadership felt too heavy, I'd look out over all this and try to remember why it mattered. And now? Nora asked. Now I come here and think about how much more beautiful it is with you in it. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Nora, in 1 month your bargained year will be complete. You'll be free to leave, to return to your human life. And I want you to know if that's what you choose, I'll honor it. I'll let you go, even though it will destroy me. Vladimir, but, he continued, his voice rough with emotion, I'm hoping you'll choose differently. I'm hoping you'll choose to stay. Not because of a bargain, not out of obligation, but because you want to. Because you love me as much as I love you. Nora's heart was pounding, her eyes filling with tears. Of course I want to stay. I love you. I choose you. Even knowing what staying might eventually mean. His crimson eyes searched hers. I'm immortal, Nora. If you remain human, I'll watch you age and die while I stay exactly as I am. I'll lose you. And I'm selfish enough to ask, have you thought about the alternative? Becoming vampire, Nora said quietly. I've thought about it. A lot. And she took a shaky breath. I'm ready. If you'll have me, if you'll turn me, I want forever with you, Vladimir. I want to see centuries with you, to stand beside you as your partner, not just your human companion. I choose this. I choose you, forever. For a moment, Vladimir simply stared at her, his expression a mixture of joy and disbelief and overwhelming love. Then he was kissing her, desperately, tenderly, like she was the most precious thing in all his long existence. Are you certain? He asked when they finally broke apart. Once it's done, there's no going back. You'll never see sunlight again, never taste human food, never, I'm certain. Nora interrupted. I've thought about this from every angle. Yes, I'll miss some things, but I'll gain so much more. Time with you. Strength, the ability to truly be your equal in this world you've shown me. She cupped his face in her hands. Turn me, Vladimir. Make me yours. Forever you're already mine, he whispered. You have been since the moment you ran through that forest screaming, kill me instead. But I'll make it eternal. I'll give you forever. His expression grew serious. It will hurt, the transformation, and it will take days. Are you prepared for that? Yes, Nora said without hesitation. When? Tonight, Vladimir decided. If you're certain, I'll call the court physicians. Make sure everything is prepared properly. You'll be cared for through every moment of the change. He pulled her close, his cool arms a familiar comfort now. By the next full moon, you'll be vampire, and we'll have eternity together. The transformation was everything Vladimir had warned her about and more. It began with his bite, not painful, surprisingly, but almost pleasurable as his fangs pierced her throat. She felt her blood flowing, her life draining, and just when she thought she might slip away entirely, he pulled back. Now you drink from me. he said hoarsely, using his own fang to open a vein at his wrist. Take my blood, take my immortality, take everything I am. Nora drank, and his blood was cool and rich and nothing like she'd expected. It tasted of power and eternity in him, and she felt it burning through her veins like liquid fire. The pain began then, her body fighting the change, dying and being reborn simultaneously. Vladimir held her through all of it, whispering reassurances, stroking her hair, promising her it would be worth it. Lysandra and Corentin were there too, along with vampire physicians who monitored her vitals and made sure the transformation progressed properly. For 3 days Nora burned. She screamed and thrashed and sometimes begged them to make it stop. But Vladimir never left her side, and slowly, gradually, the pain began to recede. On the 4th day, she woke feeling different, stronger, sharper. She could hear things she'd never heard before, conversations happening rooms away. The flow of water through underground rivers, the whisper of fabric against stone. She could see in perfect clarity even though the room was dark, and when she looked at her hands, they were pale, not as marble white as Vladimir's yet, but getting there. Nora? Vladimir's voice was cautious, hopeful. Can you hear me? She turned to look at him and gasped. He'd always been beautiful, but now he was incandescent. She could see every detail of him, could hear the old blood moving slowly through his veins, could smell the ancient power that clung to him. I can hear you, she said, and her voice sounded different, clearer, more resonant. I can hear everything. Joy transformed his features. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Welcome to immortality, my love. The next weeks were an adjustment. Nora had to learn to control her new strength. She broke things constantly at first, misjudging how much force to use. She had to learn to hunt, to drink blood without killing her prey. It was disturbing at first, but Vladimir was patient, teaching her to take only what she needed, showing her how to cloud human minds so they wouldn't remember the encounter. Her hair began to lighten, shifting from dark brown to a pale honey blonde, and her eyes changed too, the brown fading to crimson. She mourned those losses briefly, the last physical markers of her humanity. But when she looked in the mirror and saw herself standing beside Vladimir, both pale and powerful and eternal, she couldn't regret her choice. 3 months after her transformation, Vladimir called the court together for a formal announcement. Nora stood beside him in the throne room, wearing a gown of deep crimson that matched her new eyes, feeling powerful and beautiful and exactly where she belonged. Vampires of the Northern Coven, Vladimir began, his voice carrying through the chamber. Today I present to you Nora Dalton, newly transformed and no longer my ward. He turned to her, taking her hand. Today I ask her to be something far more, my partner, my equal, my queen. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vladimir pulled a ring from his pocket, ancient silver set with a ruby the size of a thumbnail, and knelt before her. Nora Dalton, he said, his crimson eyes bright with love. Will you marry me? Will you rule beside me for all eternity? Tears, the last tears she'd ever cry, she realized, because vampires couldn't produce them after the initial transformation spilled down her cheeks. Yes, she said, her voice strong and sure. Yes, forever yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger and rose, pulling her into a kiss that made the assembled vampires cheer and applaud. Even Cassian was smiling, Nora noticed. Even the vampires who'd initially resented her presence had come around, won over by her courage, her fierce loyalty to Vladimir, her willingness to sacrifice everything for love. The wedding was held 1 month later, a ceremony that blended vampire tradition with human elements Nora requested. Felix was there, wary at first when he saw what his sister had become, but gradually accepting, especially after meeting Emma, the girl he'd mentioned months ago who turned out to be his own path forward. You look happy, Felix told Nora before the ceremony, studying her new pale features, her crimson eyes. Different, but happy. I am happy, Nora assured him. This is what I chose, Felix. What I wanted. Then I'm happy for you. He hugged her carefully, still adjusting to her new supernatural strength. Even if you married a vampire king and became immortal, you're still my sister, and I'm glad you found your person. Even if he's a 300-year-old creature of the night. Nora laughed and hugged him back. He's my creature of the night, and I love him. The ceremony was beautiful, conducted in the grand hall of the Undercity with all 7 vampire covens in attendance. Nora wore white, a gown of silk and lace that took her breath away, and Vladimir wore formal black, his white hair unbound and flowing past his shoulders. When they spoke their vows, Nora's voice was steady and strong. I promise to stand beside you through all the centuries to come, to be your partner, your love, your equal, to rule with wisdom and compassion, and to never forget the humanity I chose to set aside for you. Vladimir's voice was rough with emotion as he spoke his own vows. I promise to love you through all eternity, to protect you, cherish you, honor the incredible gift you've given me. You ran toward me when you should have run away, and you've been running toward me ever since. I promise to always be worthy of that courage, that love. They sealed their vows with a kiss, and the assembled vampires erupted in celebration. For the first time in centuries, the Undercity rang with genuine joy. The reception lasted until dawn, vampires dancing and celebrating their king's marriage to the human-turned-vampire who'd captured his heart. Lysandra toasted them with blood wine, speaking eloquently about watching their love grow, about how Nora had changed Vladimir for the better. Corentin made everyone laugh with stories about Nora's early days in the court, her determination to understand vampire etiquette despite how confusing it all was. And through it all, Vladimir never let go of Nora's hand, his eyes tracking her with open adoration whenever she moved. She was his and he was hers, and they had forever stretching out before them. When the celebration finally ended and they retired to their chambers now shared, decorated with both his austere elegance and her warmer touches, Vladimir pulled her close and just held her for a long moment. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what?" "For running into that forest, for screaming 'kill me' instead, for being brave and foolish and perfect, for choosing me again and again even when it made no sense." He pulled back to look at her, "For giving me a reason to believe in love again." "Thank you for dropping your blade," Nora replied softly. "For sparing Felix, for bringing me here, protecting me, showing me that monsters can have hearts and vampires can love." She smiled. "For giving me forever." He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. And as the fall sun began to rise over the Undercity, signaling another day in their eternal night, Nora sent up a silent thank you to whatever force of fate had sent her running through that forest 2 months before her bargained year ended. She'd thought she was running toward death. Instead, she'd run straight into life, a life richer and stranger and more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. A life with a vampire king who loved her enough to change his entire world. A life that would last forever. Eternity had never looked so good.